Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get a city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get a city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get a city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1391 of Toronto Mic'd. Proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. The Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Valuable perspective for Canadian investors who want to remain knowledgeable, informed, and focused on long-term success. Season 5 of Yes, We Are Open, an award-winning podcast from Moneris, hosted by FOTML Grego and Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Today, I was going to say making his first appearance of his retirement, but it's actually his second appearance. I'll explain in a moment. It's Ivar Hamilton.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for coming to TMLX 14 on Saturday.
I actually loved being there. I just want to say off the top, I was hosting my family on Sunday, extended family, to put the Christmas tree up, and I was going to buy some lasagna at a regular supermarket. And when I went to Palma, I thought, why not buy some here? I have to tell you, the food was phenomenal. My family were just floored how great it was. My nephew lives up in Mississauga, and his wife said we are now going to get all of our lasagna and pasta from Palma. So
music to my ears, Ivor, and that's why you sponsored Toronto Mike right there. But I realized I wrote this intro as if this was your first appearance since your retirement.
Yes.
Congratulations, you were vice president at Universal Music Canada, and now you're just like a civilian.
Absolutely.
So I wrote that. And then because we were going to do this last Wednesday before TMLX 14. And then I called you up and said, hey, let's push this a week because I woke up Tuesday with zero energy and my voice was really crappy. And I'm like, oh, we can push this a week. I'm glad we did because I feel great today. But that means that your first appearance post-retirement was actually TMLX 14 and not today. But today, we're going to dive in. You comfortable?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you had an event yourself. I honestly wanted to go, but I was coming off an illness, and then my daughter got sick, and now my wife is sick, and it's been like avoiding these like minefields here. But how was your event?
I have to say, I was thinking about this on the way down here this morning, and I was like, I couldn't have gone out on a higher note. I will say that Universal Music Canada treated me unbelievably well on my exit. It was a night I'll never forget. It was absolutely fantastic. A lot of wonderful people that I worked with, and people in, both at Universal Music and in the Toronto music business and in the radio business. All of, number of Spirit of Radio people were there, and some artists were there. It was absolutely fantastic. I can't say enough great things about what happened the night before last.
So here's a couple of nice things I'll say on behalf of FOTM. So Mike Hannafin wrote in to say, congrats to a legend.
Oh, fantastic. Mike was a great guy that we worked together at CFNY, and he was in the news and sports department at the time, and great guy to work with.
Robbie J., who was at your event, says that this episode of Toronto Mic'd is highly anticipated.
Yes. So have you and I ever talked about the highly anticipated
I know we have, but remind me.
Yeah. So highly anticipated was a lot of people at Universal when we were doing radio buys. So when they're doing radio buys on The Edge, and Robbie Johnson, producer at The Edge and best known as the producer of Alan's Ongoing History of New Music, and he would write me, and I was running the marketing department at the time, and he said, if I get one more of your persons telling me that a new record is highly anticipated, I am going to lose my marbles. So, and that was probably 20 years ago. So every time Robbie, Jay, and I have some kind of interaction, absolutely everything's highly anticipated.
I love it. Love it so much. Now, Matt Layden, love this guy for years and years and years. This gentleman's in Edmonton. He tweets at me daily, who's on next. But I never have any idea, like, does he care? Is he listening? Or is he just like there to set me up, which I do appreciate, Matt. But he wrote in to say, please tell Ivar I offer my congratulations on his retirement. This is a big deal to get the congrats from Matt Layden. So
thank you, Matt. Thank you very much, Matt.
Mark Nathan was on recently because he helped break in the CanCon, the band CanCon.
Yes.
They had
Can.
You know, I made that mistake. I keep Ivar. That name trips me up every time because I always use the expression can all the time, but with
Yes.
C's, right? Can. And then the band is CanCon with K's, but my brain says it is can. It is CanCon. Of course, you're right. I Beg Your Pardon was a big hit. Mark Nathan was behind that.
Yep.
Also, the Bare Naked Ladies were introduced to Seymour Stein at Sire Records, thanks to Mark Nathan. I actually confirmed this 2 days ago with Stephen Page, who was sitting in the basement here. Mark was a dear friend of Don Burns, and I promised Mark off the top I would just seek from you, Ivar, any memories you have of Don Burns before we get into this.
Sure. Well, you know, Don was my boss. He was brought up from Buffalo by David Marsden to help oversee a lot of the music and be an assistant program director at CFNY. He was larger than life. He had a huge laugh. And of course, he had one of the best voices in the business. I mean, he was the, I guess, what's the word for it? You know, the continuity guy, like when you would hear all the Spirit of Radio IDs. Imaging, correct. So Don was the guy who did all the imaging, and he was amazing. And then whenever you needed a great voiceover, Don was your guy. He could do anything, and he did it so well. And, you know, later in life, he did a lot of acting things. I remember seeing him, he was Daddy Warbucks on Annie. I saw him at the Rose Theatre in Brampton shortly before he passed with my late mother and Kevin O'Leary and his girlfriend.
Different Kevin O'Leary, though.
A different Kevin O'Leary. Kevin O'Leary, he was the producer of Pete and Geets at CFNY. So we... You know, Don was great, and then at Universal, I used to hire him to do a lot of our voiceovers for either commercials or presentations and thing, and just, you know, bigger than life. One of the funniest guys I ever worked with, and he was a great radio guy, and you know, when the so-called mistake of '88 happened, he was certainly one of the guys who was with us in trying to save the radio station when it was going in a different direction.
Now, we're going to walk through very, very, very briefly your ongoing history of Toronto Mic'd appearances, and then I'll point out an interesting fact before we get into our topic of the day.
Sure.
So, you made your Toronto Mic debut, Ivar, in February 2016.
Okay.
That was episode 157, and I wrote a description at the time. Some of these themes might be revisited, but Mike chats with CFNY's Ivar Hamilton about his days at the Spirit of Radio, his memories of Martin Streak, how he was responsible for the Bon Jovi banner at the Air Canada Centre, and what he and David Marsden are up to these days, which is
still going.
nythespirit.com.
Yes. Yep, still going. And David was at my retirement party the night before last.
I think Robbie J wanted me to know what I missed, and he's like, Scott Turner was here.
Yes, he
and
was.
David Martin. And I'm like, oh, these are my friends. I should have been there, but it was honestly, if I could have been there, I would have been there. That's for sure. Okay, so that was February 2016. Then in August 2017, you came back and we kicked out the jams together. What a pleasure it was kicking out the jams with you, Ivar Hamilton.
That was when we played a ton of punk rock music. A great time. I introduced you to a couple of bands that you hadn't heard before, and I think it was a lot of fun.
And then October 2021, this is we're in the pandemic now. This was episode 933, the inaugural episode of the Progressive Past of Modern Melodies. Toronto Mike, that's me, Brother Bill, Cam Gordon, and you we played a game called CFNY Not, and we would ask you why were some songs
Yes,
left
I
off
remember
the
that.
CFNY
Yes.
playlist, and why were some songs on the play? We're still fascinated by this, by the way.
Well, I mean, I look back on it and do I have any regrets of songs that, we should have played or shouldn't have? And there are some.
Is there one on the top of that list that comes top of mind? You're like I talked to Tom Wilson he was at TMLX 14. Did you see Tom Wilson? You might have missed him.
I think I missed him because I was in and out fairly quickly.
Going right out of my head. Like, this was such a big jam everywhere, and CFNY wasn't touching it.
Yeah, I mean, I mean,
you were gone by
I
then.
was gone by then, so I can't say I'm, I can't really speak to that one. But if I have a regret, it was in later years when my later years were, 87, 88, that we sort of backed off on playing Rush. And to me, because of the spirit of radio and the affiliation the station had with the band in the early days, we should have never left it behind and said, it doesn't matter what the rest of the music scene is doing. We should have never done that. And I think in later years, it kind of, it was Rush they were upset about it. I know that for a fact because I'd heard it from Alex Lifeson. He goes, yeah, when there was the anniversary, station anniversary coming up, and they wanted us to come and do an interview, but they weren't even going to play Spirit of Radio. They were going to play the cover version by Catherine Wheel. That hurt.
We'll start there because your last appearance was episode 1021. Where you and many CFNY people, from David Marsden to Liz Janik to Scott Turner, May Potts, Fred Patterson, Leslie Cross, Alan Cross, Captain Phil Evans, Danny Elwell, Humble Howard Glassman, Robbie J, Bob Willett, Jay Brody. That was March 2022, episode 1021. I'm glad you were a part of that.
That was lots of fun. Great night. I mean, so many great stories from the early days, but even up to what was going on at the station in 2022.
Yeah, Jay Brody was there at the time.
Jay was a stand-up guy, putting up with all of our silly stories from way back in the day, and I hats off to him for that.
4 hours, so I just checked the time on that. We dropped 4 hours of content with all those voices I just mentioned, and great stories, and from people who couldn't be there, like Don Burns, and people we couldn't find, like Chris Shepard. Any idea where Chris Shepard is?
No. And this is a big part of the CFNY documentary, is that we could, after we talked to everybody we could think of and searched high and low, and we have not, we're never able to locate him.
So I have I'll tell you about it later, but I have a Costa Rica connection, and not that this will help you locate him, but I think that's where he is, Costa Rica.
I heard that he's somewhere in the Caribbean, and Costa Rica is who knows, but we couldn't get him for the documentary, and that was a shame. He is featured in the documentary because we certainly were able to get some classic footage and some air checks and things like that.
Sure.
But, that was one of the
archival footage. We'll call that. Okay, so we're playing Catherine Wheel. Are you behind this cover that appeared on the Spirit of Edge compilation? Because it was the only way at 102.1 was going to play this song, which really should be the anthem, right?
Well, yes. I mean, the Spirit of the Edge compilations were my idea. And there was one of the marketing persons that I worked with at the time who was handling Catherine Wheel, had a very good relationship with them. She went to them and asked them to do this cover version, and that's how it happened. And it's interesting on Catherine Wheel. I had dinner last night with some of the folks from PBS, The Bridge in Buffalo, and we talked about Catherine Wheel at the dinner, and it was just the direction of the conversation was bands that were very big in Toronto but not big in the UK. And Catherine Wheel was one of those. I went over to see them in the UK, and I think it was 93, and place was probably as big as the Rivoli.
Wow.
And if they were playing here, it probably would have been a concert hall.
So how come, Ivor? Why were they so much bigger here than at home?
I would just say that, this city picked up on certain things, and Catherine Wheel was one of them. There was a lot of instances of that. I don't want to spoil the documentary, the CFNY documentary, but there is a lot of discussion about bands that are interviewed who talked about that they played some of their biggest shows in Toronto, or where their careers kicked off in North America here. So it is something that happened, but I know it also happens in other cities around the world too, where bands are bigger here. I mean, there was just a whole thing where bands built their careers around focusing on North America, and the audiences appreciated them much more than here. It's something that went on since the 60s. I've learned recently that there's a whole string of bands that were far bigger in North America than they ever were in their own home territory, starting in the 1960s and moving to today.
Well, your next visit is going to be, we're going to kick out 10 great songs from acts from overseas that are bigger here. That's your homework, okay?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Well, I got to come up with excuses to get Ivar back. So one of the things, so we ran through all your appearances on Toronto Mike.
Sure.
And this is, even though I see we did touch on the banner, which we might touch on again, but I was careful. Like, I was conscious about the fact not to ask too many Universal Music Canada questions and keep more of it towards CFNY and just general music questions. Like, I was sensitive to that, but now that you're retired, I have no such sensitivity.
Right. Well.
Okay. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes.
We'll see what direction it goes in. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I mean, you reserve the right to. I'm not going to rough you up or anything. All right. And you look great, though. Are you still running?
I haven't do lots of walking with the dog, but I think now that I'm retired, I'm rejoining a gym that I haven't been to for a few years, and health is priority number one, because once you get into retirement, you only have so many mobile years, and I want to take full advantage of that.
You're a smart man. You still drinking beer?
Not much.
Not too much. Okay.
Mostly non-alcoholic beer.
Okay, I don't have any of that for you. So
but the occasional one, the occasional one's fine. So
I will send you home with some fresh craft beer from Great Lakes Brewery. And you loved Palma Pasta so much. I do have another large lasagna for you in my freezer.
Oh, that is so kind of you.
Taking care of you, man. We know you love your Palma Pasta, and you got your Great Lakes beer. They pair well together. Please tell me, how do you first come to work for Universal Music Canada? Through Polygram? How does it work for you?
Yeah, so it all sort of came about with, when there was the movement at CFNY to make those changes in the programming, when it was like, when we were told we're going to go in a different direction, and I was sent to the Toronto Public Library to do research on chart hits, and we were going to start playing chart hits, and maybe I haven't got some of the dates right, but as I recall, it was the Labor Day week, over the Labor Day weekend in '88 was when they started making that move towards playing a lot of those, introducing some of those top 40 songs.
Well, you might hear like Monkey by George Michael.
Yeah, I mean, there was just, Paula Abdul. There was Madonna. There were lots. There was but the edict was, we have to play X amount of top 40 songs, no matter what they sound like every week. Which, and you could still mix in with some of the CFNY songs, but it was an absolute train wreck, and it just didn't work. So I was just like, I can't be a part of this anymore. I just was like, finally, I was like, I've had enough. And I was also told that we would like to send you to Hamilton to work on a TV show that we've got in production. And it was like, I never worked in TV. I had zero experience in TV. So tell me that's a hint that I'm out the door. So I needed to find something else. And there was a trip that Polygram did to Russia, to Moscow in the fall of '88 that I was asked to go on as one of the last things I did at CFNY. And they took a pile of radio programmers and journalists and some TV people to Moscow to see Big Country. And so the guy who was the head of national promotion, Bob Ansell at the time, and I'd known Bob for many, many years. And so there was something that was coming up at Polygram. And I started the first week it was like last week in November, first week of December at Polygram here in Toronto. And it was only a regional office at the time. And so I started in regional promotion. And I think for the first 6 to 8 months, I thought, what did I get myself into? What am I doing here? Right? And it was, everything. It was just, I suppose like starting any new job, it was just a complete complete change of environment, completely different way of doing things. And I, would say like working in radio, it was pretty loose. I mean, it was pretty loose over the years and how things were done. And, you coming to work at a multinational corporation and all of a sudden things are quite a bit different, quite a bit stricter. And I just had to sort of sit there and open my mind and retool, and away you went.
If you want to belt this out with me, Ivor, there's no shame in that. Okay? Just listen to that emotional swell here. Holy smokes.
This Romeo is bleeding, but you can't see his blood. It's nothing but some feelings.
What lyrics?
Beautiful.
So
Wow.
Beautiful thing.
Jean Bon Jovi, what a talent.
It's been raining since you left me. Now I'm drowning in the flood.
Wow. That's deep.
See, I've always been a fighter, but without you, I give up. Now I can't sing a love song like the way it's meant to be. Well, I guess I'm not that good anymore, but baby, that's just me. Yeah, I will love you, baby, always.
Is this your karaoke jam, Ivor? It screams karaoke. Oh my God. All right, so my ears are bleeding now. Is that one of the lyrics? Your ears are bleeding now. All right, this is probably, Ivor, we're going to start with Bon Jovi. This is probably the biggest act of the late 80s, early 90s that Polygram had. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely they were. So it was Bon Jovi and Def Leppard were neck and neck at the same time. They were the big ones that we had when I started.
Bon Jovi makes Def Leppard seem like the Beatles. My opinion, everybody.
Yeah,
okay,
sure,
go
sure.
ahead, Ivor.
I mean, I was in the trenches with both those bands, more so with Bon Jovi, though. I did a ton of work with Bon Jovi across Canada, lots of promotion, tons of radio things. At one point, I was like very, very fortunate. I got to fly in their private jet with them on some dates, and but had a great respect for those guys. I mean, John is a really great business guy, and I love working with those guys. I always had a great respect for them. And Def Leppard, not as much working with them, but Def Leppard also. I mean, the one thing about Def Leppard, I will say, Joe Elliott has an incredible taste in music, and he's got a radio show that's on Sirius, and it is...
Is that a British band that's bigger here than at home?
Yes. The thing is also, but you go in a different direction. Bon Jovi, when they weren't doing so well in the U.S., they were doing huge business overseas.
Oh, in Italy, right?
No, I mean...
No, everywhere, okay.
Bon Jovi would play, if they came here, they'd play Maple Leaf Gardens, and they go to the UK, they'd be playing, 2 nights at Wembley Stadium. So they worked the global markets when nobody else was, which was great. So...
Okay, I'm glad you had a good relationship with these guys. Now, listen, I did have Slippery When Wet in 1987. I had it on cassette. And there were definitely songs on Slippery When Wet I would play over and over again and add them to mixtapes and stuff. So this happened. But at some point, I don't know, maybe after Bad Medicine or something, I just grew to despise this band. And if John's listening, it's not personal. Like, I'm sure it sounds like you're telling me, Ivor, John's a nice guy, right? He was always good to you, good professional
Absolutely.
Man.
They totally were. And, they felt it in the early 90s when the whole grunge thing started to take foot. And they really felt that, but at that point, they made this Keep the Faith record, and they kept working hard. They weren't that affected by what went on, even though it seemed like grunge completely took over.
They found their lane. But what also irked me as I got more savvy and older, which means in the last couple of years. I'm just kidding. Okay, so what's bugged me a bit was that they kind of tried to have this like blue-collar New Jersey thing, like they were a bunch of pals from Jersey coming together. And then I watched 60 Minutes one day, and John's up there talking about how, oh no, like he owns Bon Jovi Inc., and then he hires like Richie Sambora, and these people are like, on the payroll to work for like Bon Jovi Inc. Like, it's not at all like you might hear if you talk to the Tragically Hip or Pearl Jam or whatever. Like, this is truly a business, and he just hires these parts around him.
Listen, there's always going to be bands like that, and it's tough on relationships, but it is what it is. I know it was the same thing for the Pixies, and everything in the Pixies is Charles, and he controls it 100%. And you have bands that still have that. Well,
like Smashing Pumpkins, for example.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Right. Okay. So, talk to me again. Even if we have visited this in the past, let's revisit it. I was super furious to see a Bon Jovi banner erected at the Air Canada Centre, and then I found out this good guy Ivar Hamilton, future FOTM, was responsible. Tell me about that story.
That was just we had a sponsorship with the Raptors in my time at Universal, and there was the Raptors took a bunch of the sponsors to Atlanta to see a game, and great sitting there, and there was a banner sitting up in the at whatever where the Atlanta team plays, and it was from one of the local bands, or at least a band that had played there numerous times. I can't remember off the top of my head.
TLC maybe?
No, it wasn't. It was more like one of the
Outcast.
It was it was like more of one of the jam bands, and
okay.
So I was sitting there with the guy.
The Allman Brothers, are they from there?
They were, but it wasn't the Allman Brothers.
I'm just going to name bands until you stop.
Anyway, I remember sitting there with the guy, the sponsorship guy from Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, and I said, we should look at doing something there and look into it. And I went and did my research and said who had played the Air Canada Centre more times, or Scotiabank more times than anybody else, and it was Bon Jovi.
Really?
So that
more than the Tragically Hip.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So anyway, I said, why don't we do something here? Like, we're a sponsor. We're going to continue our sponsorship, and it's like, let's see what we can do here, and let's see if I can get the band support on it. And they loved the idea, so that's how that ended up happening. I know the banner's not up there any longer, but
do you know where the banner is?
I do not,
because I wanted to have like a TMLX event where we burn it in a public park, like
Mike,
exercise the demons.
Please, just. I mean, I learned. I got to tell you something, man. It's like, I used to be an awful music snob earlier in my career, but as I went along, it's like I got to the point as we got older. It's like people can just like what they want to like, but I know you've got to.
No, you're 100% right. I'm leaning in on the Bon Jovi for fun.
Be in your bonnet about
winking
that
on you.
banner.
Okay. Well, I have a bee in my bonnet about. I got to talk to you about another band too.
Okay.
Not quite as big as Bon Jovi, but I know you're responsible for some of this.
Pardon me, but does your make it bad?
Can you name that tune yet?
It's a Bootsauce song.
They only wanted to hurt you, maybe make you suffer and do you wrong. That all the hope I can give you, sadly, is in the next life you'll have the gun.
Love Monkey number 9. There you go. That is the song.
All right, we touched on this at TMLX 14 though, but you worked closely with Bootsauce, right?
I was in the trenches many times with those guys. I think out of all the Canadian bands I've seen in my 45-year career, they're probably in the top 5. I mean, mostly because I had to work, I was working with them. But
sure.
But the band I have seen the very most is Teenage Head.
And that's because you love Teenage Head.
I absolutely
That's
do.
an authentic,
Absolutely.
organic,
Yeah.
love it so much. And whenever we kick out the jams with Viber, there's going to be Teenage Head. Bootsauce, it's a professional obligation, I assume. So are you the part of the team that needs to sell Bootsauce to radio, Much Music?
I was.
What can you tell me about signing the band and working with them and trying to get them to fit? Like anything you can. Bootsauce comes up quite a bit on this program.
I'm surprised. I gotta say, Mike, that I'm like, I mean, it is one of those bands, Canadian bands, that a lot of people have forgotten about. But anyway, I mean, it was they were out of Montreal. It was our head of A&R at the time was Bob Ansell, and he had Corky Lang, who was of Mountain fame. It was on his team, who helped put it all together, and they were the ones who did the deal. I really didn't know an awful lot about them until I got there, but I was certainly entrenched into a lot of it. The same person, a woman named Livia Tortella, who did the Catherine Wheel Spirit of Radio song. She was the marketing manager on Bootsauce, and she worked her tail off on it for 3 records or whatever. I honestly think that there was a changing of the guard at the company, and there was some acquisitions that came in. So Bob and Corky left the company. So, and I think when those things happen, there's many stories of bands that have one set of people supporting them, and then all of a sudden there's a changing of the guard, and then things sort of go their way.
So, in your experience, what kind of, we talked about how John Bon Jovi was always very professional and easy for you to deal with. How were the guys from Bootsauce? They were green, and they didn't have much money at the time. They didn't make a lot of money, but they worked hard. They did the rounds. I mean, I saw them play in every small bar in Ontario, and things like the Edge Fest and things like that. They did work hard. Their live set was really, really great. I saw them I mentioned on Saturday, I saw them, they did a show at 4 a.m., a showcase at CBGB's in front of about 10 people. And so they kind of broke through, and they did everyone's a winner did well. And I used to talk to them about their influences and things. And I said that they had this song called Scratch in the Hole, and I really thought it sounded like Captain Beefheart. That was my opinion, right? Okay. Then so about 3 months later, I hear Drew Ling talking to them about Scratch in the Hole at a radio interview. Goes, "Oh yeah, we're totally influenced by Captain Beefheart." There it is. There's the T. Okay. All right. So Bootsauce, which is kind of a ridiculous name for a band, but that's okay. There were a lot of ridiculous names for bands in the 90s. But There's another ridiculous name for a band that seemed to be corrected at some point. I wonder if you have that story. Is Rainbow Butt Monkeys.
Oh, right.
So Rainbow Butt Monkeys, I think there was a period of time where they just, every time I go to, an Edge Fest or any kind of music festival, I was going to see Rainbow Butt Monkeys / Finger 11. They're a Burlington band, but they were around, they were at Polygram trying to make it back then.
They were. I mean, they were only really had the one record, and then again, it was like, it didn't do an awful lot, and I think they were getting ready to do the second or third. I can't think. Maybe it was only the second one, and then they decided to part ways, go in a different direction. So
they're not at Polygram when they become
Finger 11.
Finger 11.
No.
Okay.
But I mean, towards the end, they had Finger 11 back. So what goes around comes around in certain instances, and you get bands back. I mean, we had. I mean, the one thing that there's certain acts that. I would say some of the sort of more heritage bands have been around for a long time, and they have a little more leverage. It was like, Van Morrison came and went. Like, it was, Van Morrison would do a record for Warner, and he'd do a record for Polygram, or he'd do a record for, one of the Universal labels, and then it would be, he'd come back and do something for a distributed label or something. And It was the same, like Paul Weller went to Warner Music, and then it was like one album, it was like, oh, Paul Weller's back with us. I'm like, oh, okay, great.
All right, you're being a very good sport about all this. Is Kiss like one of those recurring clients that would kind of come and go?
No, Kiss were consistent through my entire career. I mean, when I started back in late '88, Kiss were on the roster, and I think shortly thereafter, I think in '89, we had a Kiss album, and throughout I had a very good relationship with Kiss for many, many years, and had some great personal time with Paul and Gene. And I mean, the thing is with Kiss, I mean, they played their very first shows outside of the U.S. in Edmonton, and every tour, you look at through the history of Kiss, on every album cycle, there was always a string of Canadian dates. And even on this last run, where unfortunately the Toronto and Ottawa shows were canceled, they went right across Canada. They played every market in the country. And, I just think they were always great to Canadian fans. Although I do recall at one point they were really upset that Much Music wasn't playing their videos. And Paul Stanley said, on stage at one of the shows, and I mean, if you listen to Paul Stanley's stage banter is legendary. I mean, people do comedy acts on Paul Stanley's stage banter, and he was like, every time we come to Toronto, it's like Much Music, they'll play our videos when they get here, but we know that we leave, they don't. So Much Music, you can ask a large mooses, what what, and so. Anyway, but I mean, at the same time, like Paul Stanley was here for Phantom of the Opera.
Yes.
Gene Simmons had a record label
and married
here.
a Canadian.
Married a Canadian. I mean, Gene Simmons brought Family Jewels to Universal Music Canada to film, and it was one of the greatest days. I mean, I just never forget it. It was great. Like, they're actually going to film Family Jewels in a Universal Music marketing meeting. And
wow.
I'd never prepared so much for a meeting. It was like, just like unbelievable. And I sent our agenda to Gene, and he goes, "What do you think, Gene?" He goes, "Oh, this is great. Like, thanks for being so well prepared." And I was like, "Oh, I feel great." Right. So, there's like 30 people in this boardroom, and all of a sudden Gene Simmons walks in. Our agenda goes completely out the window, right? So, and it's Gene's a showman, right?
Yes.
He's a total showman, and I'll always remember. And this is probably I can't remember what the year was, but it was probably 10 or 12 years ago, maybe even longer. And there was a Canadian band that they had on Gene's label. They were called the Envy. And one of the marketing persons said to Gene, he said, "Gene, we should do a free download, to get build the audience or whatever." And anything with Kiss, I mean, they were the absolute kings of merchandise. They did it.
You can
before
get a Kiss
anybody else.
casket.
Anything.
Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home.
But they were always never really much on freebies. But his point was, he said, well, he goes, my mother pays for Kiss tickets, and I just thought, he's making a good point here. So we never did the download. Although I think they did the download later on, but he just wanted to make a point that, there's a price on everything, and he wasn't wrong, So I have tremendous respect for him. I mean, we worked together when Detroit Rock City was being filmed here. I helped them get extras.
Oh, Eddie Furlong, right? I remember this.
Yeah,
yes.
and they filmed on the 407 that was at C&E, and they did a bunch of the live scenes at Cops Coliseum in Hamilton. And the one thing that was so much fun was they called me and said, "Ivar, we need some people to extras. So can you help us out? We need people to," and it was supposed to be, set back in the 1970s. And, we're going to make sure that we'll have all the costumes there. And I said, "Well, I think you're going to be okay because you're filming in Hamilton." and no disrespect to people in Hamilton, but I mean, it's got a working class town or whatever.
Right.
But I remember going down to the set and they're going, "You're right. Like, all of the costumes were all just sitting there. Like everybody was dressed fine."
That's perfect. Are you glad that you got out just before the hologram era takes hold?
I'm excited about the hologram era. That's the one thing. I mean, I went to London.
You're retired now. You don't have to say that.
No, I
know,
don't, and I mean it sincerely, and I say that because in October I went over to London on a vacation. I went over for the Buffalo Bills game, and I went and saw the Undertones and the Tom Robinson band play, and a wonderful time. But I wanted to check out this ABBA hologram show, and I have to say, I mean, it blew me away. And I'm not really an ABBA fan, but I went to this show. It was a purpose-built theater in the East End of London, brand new theater, holds 3,000 people, to see where the technology's gone, because I'd read so much about it. And it was and the tickets was like $185. But I went on a Monday night. It was sold out, 3,000 people there, and it was, I would say, it was about 95% you couldn't tell. And just to give you an illustration, at the end of the show, ABBA, as they are, look now in 2023, came out on stage, and a buddy of mine who was with me, who's a doctor by trade, and he just said to me, he goes, that was amazing that ABBA were there to thank everybody for being there. And I was like, no, that was a hologram. So I think that there is great possibilities once the costs come down, and now that KISS have announced it to have bands live on in perpetuity if it's done right. And I will say on the ABBA thing that the entire show wasn't just a complete live performance. They mixed in some orchestration. They had a live band that was augmenting some of the sounds. They had a video from Waterloo from the 1970 Eurovision Song Contest, and they did a couple of animation things. So I think, it just really depends on the way they work it, but I think it's going to be a very, very exciting time for people to discover music from different eras. And that ABBA show was they basically set it up so you were there at a 1979 ABBA concert. So we're very, very creative.
BC Place! Make some noise for Black Eyed Peas!
Wow, Ivor, Black Eyed Peas, Grey Cup halftime.
Yes, sir.
Talk to me about your role, if any, in these acts appearing as the Grey Cup halftime show.
Okay. So it started, my relationship with doing things with the CFL started after going to a couple of Grey Cups as a fan. And so every year there was a couple of guys that we went out to Grey Cup games just for the hell of it. Guys that we were, all still single, and the wives would let us go, and so or whatever. So being a couple of them, it was like, God, the halftime shows are awful, right? and so Shania Twain, when the Up record was coming out, and we had a group meeting, it was like there was like 20 people, like, let's just get everybody together and let's do some planning around what we can do for Shania Twain. And so somebody came up with the idea. It's like, well, let's see, what advertising we can do in the Grey Cup, because we always know that the Grey Cup is one of the, biggest television programs of the year. So I called the CFL out of the blue and said, how much is it to advertise during the Grey Cup halftime? I'm interested. I'm calling from Universal Music. Talk to me about this, right? So they came back with some ridiculous, and this is, I think it was it 98 or whatever, and even then it was like, it's going to be $100,000 for a 30-second commercial. And I was like, well, I can't afford that. And I said, who have you got for the halftime show this year? And it was like some, country band that sort of was okay.
Was it Prairie Oyster?
No, it wasn't. It was not Prairie Oyster.
Right.
Anyway, anyway, I said to him, okay, what if I could get you Shania Twain to do your halftime show? And he goes, I'll kick the country band into the parking lot if you can get us Shania Twain. Then it just became like a bigger conversation, and calling Shania's management team and asking them about it, and it was new ground, and the league weren't that prepared for it either. But in the long run, we made it happen because. And Shania wasn't sure either. There was a management. She was a U.S. management team. They weren't sure what to do. Shania ended up calling her sister and saying, do you think I should do the Grey Cup? And her sister was like, absolutely. I'm a big football fan. You should do it. And so the league called the NFL and said, can we potentially borrow some of your staging that you use for for some of the previous Super Bowls.
Right.
So they did, and we made it happen, and it was, and so that was the start of a 20 plus year relationship with the CFL doing Grey Cups, and we did basically all of them with the exception of, I think it was like there was one year that a reunited BTO did it, one year that EMI came in and did Lenny Kravitz, and then this past year when
Green Day
did it. So it was an absolutely great run, and it was always an incredible amount of work to get it done, and you're also dealing with weather conditions, and so those you never know what you're going to get. So anyway, I love doing it. This Black Eyed Peas thing. The thing with Black Eyed Peas was in the year that happened in 2005, the Monkey Business record was the biggest selling album in Canada, hands down. It was absolutely huge around the world. And there was also another instance where Canada was leading the way with Black Eyed Peas. And they their manager said to the band, he goes, we really need to do something more for Canada. And so this is what they did. We got a huge amount of backlash, though, from the fans. But,
because they're American.
Well, they were the very first American band to play the Grey Cup. However, in the press, for business press, and said CFL blasting into the 21st century by having somebody like the Black Eyed Peas play the Grey Cup. So that opened the door for lots of other international acts to play the Grey Cup. And I remember my boss at the time said to me, he goes, I want to do an award presentation for the Peas. How can we make this really big? And I said, all right, well, I'll make it big. And so right after they finished their performance, we presented them with their 5 times platinum on the field at BC Place in front of 50,000 people. So that was a real, real career highlight.
Okay, wow. These are some mind blows, I think, for some people, that you're greatly responsible for this run of bigger acts, I'd say, to play the halftime show at the Grey Cup.
Yes.
And without you, maybe there is no Green Day in 2023.
I had nothing to do with Green Day. I know the guy who.
No, but you have to pave the way, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of
so
standards.
Humble.
They changed, they changed a lot of way they were doing business. But anyway, I think that people enjoyed it. My former company had the opening act, so we always had even the years that we didn't have the halftime show, we usually had the opening act or had some great music featured into the Grey Cup, and and we worked with a lot of the teams over the years. We had sponsors. We also had sponsorships with the Argos and the Tiger Cats, and we worked with the Lions and then also did some work with the MLSE and did some work with the Jays, and that was all fun, bringing music and sports together. And Universal Music still does that too. So
yeah, you should call me up. I love it when sports and music get married in some regard, like just two great passions, and I love it when they intersect.
Yes.
So is this, you were VP of Catalog and Sports Marketing. Is this when this falls on your lap?
I was doing sports marketing for a number of years. It was kind of, I was just doing it anyway, and then it was added to my portfolio. But the catalog became much more important and, a huge part of the business. So I stepped back from it, but I still, towards the last number of years, I still, contributed by putting in suggestions for music to go into, Blue Jays games or NHL games and things like that. Like, we put a lot of, there was a lot of hip music into those games or it just depends, what we were kind of looking at as being, there was always a combination of like new acts and some classic things depending on what the teams wanted to do or the event was.
So we will definitely be talking some Tragically Hip shortly, like on the business side. So as I drill into your career, and I'm like, oh, it's the definitive Ivar Hamilton exit interview. But so there's a little bit of nerdy stuff here, but we should just address it. So you're with Polygram. Seagram buys Polygram in 1998.
Yes.
This is the Montreal whiskey, the Bronfman family and everything. Then Polygram becomes part of it. I want to thank Mark Weisblad for helping me understand all this stuff, because he sees this stuff better than I do. And he can
good.
dumb
Well,
it down for me.
say hi to Mark.
I will.
Good
He's
guy.
listening right now for sure. So then Polygram becomes a part of Universal, because they swallow up
Correct.
another,
Correct.
this like a big gobble. So at that point now, you're part of Universal Music Group.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was, it happens, you know. I mean, when my days at radio, I mean, we changed ownership numerous times, and at Universal, when I started at Polygram, during the first couple of years that we were there, they ended up acquiring Island Records, they ended up acquiring A&M Records, Motown was acquired, and then Def Jam was acquired, and it's like, wow, we're certainly getting to be a big company. This is really, really huge. And then out of nowhere, the Universal
Right.
Universal, who was a smaller company at the time than Polygram was, managed to put it together to do the merger. So it was a whole, you know, it was a seismic change for everybody, and we all had to re-interview for our jobs and start new, and but you know, the transition, I think, was pretty good, and you know, I look back on the, you know, whatever that was 25 years ago. I mean, the company's just, you know, it grew in leaps and bounds, and it's you know, weathered the storm, and they're the greatest music company in the world. So
I will bounce around a little bit, but I wanted to cover that business because, you know, just interesting how they gobble each other up. And then, so a couple of bands I want to ask you about that you worked with at Polygram. One was you worked with Art Bergman. In that, there was that period of time where, like, making Art Bergman famous.
I mean, it was a very short time. I mean, he was with Duke Street Records prior to that, and when I started at Polygram, the same team that signed Bootsauce signed Art Bergman. So I worked with Art on I can't remember if it was one or two records. I mean, I just basically ran him around for press and did some radio things with him. But so it wasn't.
This is the album with Bound for Vegas on it. Do you remember? This is the Bound for, because Much Music was playing Bound for Vegas. Okay, yeah, okay.
So, I mean,
I dig that song.
So I mean, as I said, it was kind of like a short term for me. It wasn't a long-term thing. So my memories with Art are like, yeah, we had a good relationship. We did a lot of interviews together, took him to a lot of interviews and worked his records to radio and things like that. But so.
And Lionel Richie was part of Polygram when you were there?
Well, yes, Lionel, was on Motown. Lionel Richie, I mean, I have to say, you get into, my background coming from, the CFNY and being an alternative guy and all this kind of thing. And you just end up having an incredible amount of respect when you sit there and hear their stories. And Lionel Richie was, he was one of the most cordial guys you ever want to meet. Great laugh. Got a million stories to tell you back, his days of Motown and the Commodores and things like that. But I got an incredible amount of respect for that guy. One of my all-time favorite guys to work with.
Love to hear it. Absolutely. Now, let me, no, I'm going to hold on to this one for a second, but just a couple more like kind of random names I'm going to throw at you. But you worked with Sarah Harmer?
Yes.
Future FOTM is how I refer to her. Tyler did a good sales pitch at this on Save Ontario Place thing that happened with the West End Phoenix.
Right.
So what was it like? Just tell me a little bit about Sarah.
Well,
I've always respected her music.
I think the thing with Sarah Harmer was, when you're working at a music company, a label, and you sign somebody, you're much more invested in it than you are for an international act, although, you shouldn't really, international acts, you get there as well. But when you're with a domestic act, nothing is more satisfying than when you can take somebody from nothing and build it to, a gold record status or something that helps, that breaks out internationally or what have you. So I really, I maybe sort of rephrase that, because some of the international acts I worked with, it was incredibly satisfying too. Like, when Lady Gaga started, she was nothing and she broke out of Canada, and that was incredibly satisfying. But Sarah Harmer, I'll always remember when we presented her with a gold record, and then it was like, And our president at the time, or the guy that I was working for, Steve Kane, he goes, this is a really good one. This is so satisfying. And I totally agree with him that it was, Sarah Harmer was an absolute charm.
Good to hear. What about M. Griner, FOTM M. Griner?
M. Griner, well, the thing is with M. Griner, the company at the time, I mean, we had different departments and divisions, so I was never really directly involved with M. Griner. I knew her, and it was on the fringe. We'd see each other at shows every once in a while, and we'd help out occasionally with some stuff, but I never really had that much of a relationship with her. I will say I think it was 2012, there was a Nick Drake tribute show, a couple of concerts that were done. There was one in Toronto and one in Kitchener, maybe one or two other places. And she was a big part of that. And we had a Nick Drake anniversary reissue at the time. And so, I did a little bit of work with her around that.
I recently had Michelle McAdory to the basement here for a chat about Crash Vegas and more. And Crash Vegas was signed to Polygram. They
were signed to Polygram. Again, another, I thought they were a really great band. We had a good run with them, and, I wish them all the best.
Yeah, she seemed frustrated. The follow-up album didn't quite seem to go anywhere.
I think that was also at the time. My memory may not serve me best on this. That there was somewhat of a changing of the guard at that point, so things might have just moved in a different direction. So,
and that's a story you hear echoed quite often on this. Sometimes just your champion leaves, or they want to maybe a label wants to push a similar sounding different act. And
it's no different than any business that when you had a Kyle Dubas leaving the Leafs this past year. There was a changing of the guard, or when Lou Lamoriello leaves the Leafs. It's a changing of the guard. Things change, and different things. They move on to different things, and you like any business, if you're given the sets of priorities and things that your company's working on, you just go with it. That's what you get paid to do.
Now, you, of course, worked at CFNY, the Spirit of Radio, with David Marsden. But at some point in the mid-'90s, you actually had I'm not sure how long it lasted, you'll tell me, but you had a show on the other guy's station, Q107.
I did it for 11 months.
Okay.
And I was Danny Kingsbury, who was at CFNY, and then he ended up at Q and said, we want to do a new music show or whatever. And so for whatever reason, I got asked to see if I could come in and do it. And I had a lot of fun doing it, but I have to say that they really did not have much of an understanding of new music and alternative on Q107. I know for a fact that I played bands on Q107 that were never played before and never played since.
Wow.
And but I would submit my playlist every week, say this is what I'm going to play, and let me know if everything's okay on this. And I never heard anything. And then I remember towards the end, it was like Danny called me and he goes, I listened to your show and I didn't know one band that you played on your show. And I was like, well, clearly you don't know a lot about new music. So that kind of came to an end after about 11 months, but I really enjoyed my time. I mean, listen, I got a chance to do, they used to have the Steve Warden and John Derringer used to do whatever, the Rock Report. And
was it the 6 o'clock Rock Report?
6 o'clock Rock Report. And I got to do the Rock
Mako
Report.
Senior.
Got to do the Rock Report one week while they were away on vacation. And we had some great acts in, and I remember the Ramones coming in. I was like, this is great, and so I quite enjoyed my time at Q107, and I'm still friends with some people over there. And Joey Vendetta came to my retirement party the other night, so we're still pals.
I missed meeting he's somehow eluded my invitations into the basement. I wanted to talk to Joey Vendetta. Who doesn't, right? And you got to put in a word for me, Ivor. That's some more homework for you. You got to tell Joey he should come on Toronto Mike.
I would be happy to reach out to Joey. He's a great guy. He does a great job over at Q107. He's another guy who had incredible relationships with sports teams. When he had his time in Los Angeles at Live Nation, he used to put events together around NHL All-Star Weekend all over the United States. He was a very big part of that, knew all the hockey players. And for a lot of Canadians that went to LA, which Jake Gold reminded me that Canada's third biggest city is LA with all the expats there. So
Right.
Joey was the go-to for most people who were new to LA and helping people get set up with like, oh, I need a place to live. I need,
Amazing.
I need to get my life on track. And Joey was one of those guys who would just always help Canadians out.
All right, Joey Vendetta, this is a call to arms. You're coming on Toronto Mike. Reach out, mike@torontomike.com. Let's get this in the calendar for 2024. Would love it so much. Now, let me just thank a couple of partners here. I've been holding on to a segment here, my favorite band of all time, and get some of those stories. But Ivar, you are retiring. You're retired now. You need to finally learn how to plan, invest, and live smarter. So I have a podcast for you. It's called the Advantaged Investor Podcast from Raymond James Canada. Whether you already work with a trusted financial advisor or currently manage your own investment plans, the Advantaged Investor provides the engaging wealth management information you value as you pursue your most important goals. And what are those goals now? Seeing lots of live music, traveling the world. What is next for you?
A lot of reading. I want to do a ton of reading. Certainly, we want to finish off the CFNY documentary. Alan and I are going to work on another documentary that I really can't get into many details about.
Is it about James B?
It certainly is not. Scott Turner and I are going to potentially work on a podcast. Maybe there's a book in the works.
You know, I've been talking to Scott Turner about having a podcast. Ask him. I've been telling him for years, all these tidbits he puts on social media, 30 years ago this, 35 years ago
Scott's
that.
amazing. Like Scott is phenomenal in record keeping, better than anybody out there. I know he does a great job. So we've talked about doing some things together. I want to do some volunteer work in the community and work with the Junos. I mean, I've worked with the Junos for many, many years. I did Juno auction. I was on the marketing committee for a couple of years, and I was on the adult alternative committee at the Junos for probably the last 15 years. I'd love to help them out with their Hall of Fame, because there's still a number of acts that deserve to be in there. And
who's most deserving that's not yet in there?
Well, in my opinion, Teenage Head are, but there are a few other ones that people have mentioned.
Because I had Glass Tiger here. Well, I had Alan Frew here yesterday, and they just got into. Is that the Rock of Fame, or is that different?
That was the Walk of Fame, which is a different scenario. So
because they call it Rock of Fame, and then April Wine got in, and then we talked about Miles, but that's a different.
It is, yeah. So
thing. Okay.
So I mean, I think the thing is that there's some acts, like Teenage Head and like Lighthouse is another one. But they, as years go on, the people that are involved with their mindset is a little bit more, let's say 90s. So they're looking forward. So they're not thinking about 60s and late 70s bands. So anyway, we can all be happy and get it done at some point. So
on the live stream, live.torontomike.com, there's lots of great feedback in real time happening there. I want to shout out Canada Kev. Canada Kev's wondering quickly here, did you work with Beastie Boys, The Cult, The Police, Queen, Tears for Fears, Tom Waits, U2? I never heard of any of these bands. These are some obscure indie bands he's talking about. But,
So I did work with The Cult a lot. I mean, even in starting at CFNY, I mean, I was a huge champion of that band. And then so when I got to Polygram, I mean, Polygram had uniquely in Canada, they had a deal with 4AD Records and Beggars Banquet, which were the Cult were with, even though they were different label elsewhere. But when the Cult did Sonic Temple, I worked with them extensively. We did lots and lots of work together, and I did the Ceremony record. Remember we presented them with a gold record on New Year's Eve at Maple Leaf Gardens, and Lenny Kravitz were opening from them. And I recall when Ian Asbury coming into CFNY doing an interview and saying, and when they had Guns N' Roses opening for them, and he was plugging Guns N' Roses left, right, and center, which I thought was great. Like he said, there's a great band that are opening for us. We think they're going to be big, Guns N' Roses. So
wow.
So yes, Tears for Fears. Yes, the record that I guess that was most was the sowing the seeds of love, and that was when I had just started with the company. So yes, worked with them, and then in later years they'd re-signed to Concord. We did a bit of work with them on their last studio record as well. And one of the things I would love to see on Tears for Fears is they recorded a live album at Massey Hall. It came out for Record Store Day a couple of years ago, and it was gone in a minute. Like nobody. It just needs to be something like the wider public should be able to have. So hopefully that will see the light of day, because they shot videos here. So they had such a strong affiliation to this city and this country. So we deserve to have more Tears for Fears.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I want to just give you my condolences because, of course, since we last talked, excluding TMLX 14, Hal Harbour passed away.
Yes.
And I know I have please help me, Chimps for Burgess Meredith. What was the name of Hal Harbour's musical outfit?
Stunt Chimps.
I missed the stunt. Oh my goodness gracious! But he absolutely had a cult thing in there with Chris Shepherd. I know they were buddies and everything. Yep. And I was sharing this, far and wide when I learned when I got the word that Doug Barron, aka we all knew him as Hal Harbour, had passed away. He's also an FOTM. So yeah, I know you knew Hal. Great guy.
We greatly missed. And one of the other guys that passed away too, which it was from a distance, but I was very close with, was Brad McNally, who I got to go and visit in Australia in 2018. Was very, very thankful to spend some time with him. We did one radio show together, so and I have some great memories of Brad.
Absolutely. I got corrected on the live stream, just shouting out a few more FOTMs that are there. Basement Dweller is there, and he tells me Bound for Vegas was on Duke Street Records. So I messed up that. It's one of the many facts I'm going to get wrong during this episode.
It happens, right?
Early and often on this program, absolutely. Ian Service has been chiming in. It's good to see Ian on the live stream. And VP of Sales was here, and Andrew Ward was here. And who else can I quickly shout out? Rosie is here. Hello to Rosie. We're going to close with Rosie and Gray. That's for you, Rosie. Moose Grumpy is here. Lots of great people hanging out with you, Ivor, during your exit interview today.
Thank you so much for being here, and hope you enjoy what we've been talking about.
Okay, so I gave you lasagna, I gave you beer. I want to give you a speaker. This is a quality Bluetooth speaker for you, Ivor, and that's courtesy of Moneris.
Thank you so much.
And you'll enjoy that because you'll be listening to Season 5 of Yes, We Are Open, which is an inspiring and award-winning podcast from Moneris, hosted by FOTM Al Grego, who was with us at TMLX 14 on Saturday. Al went out east. He went to the Maritimes, land of Hal Harbour, and he went to Newfoundland, and he collected inspiring stories from small business owners, and he shares them in Season 5 of Yes, We Are Open. So that's a free podcast people should subscribe to right away. And Ridley Funeral Home, that's a measuring tape courtesy of Ridley Funeral Home.
Thank you for that. I will use that when I have upcoming renovations to do at home.
Listen to our thoughts with illusions of someday, cast in a golden light. No dress rehearsal, this is our life. And that's where the hornet stung me.
You don't mind if I just sing this song for the next few minutes, do you, Ivor? You're okay with that?
Any hip, anytime.
Well, now this is what I've been waiting for. Should I start recording our conversation? I'll start recording now because I want to hear Ivar Hamilton share with us everything you did with the Tragically Hip during your illustrious career on the dark side of the label there?
Well, I mean, I did a lot with the Hip over the years. It was, I'll give it a little bit of a setup. When when Universal and Polygram merged, and we moved to the building, 2450 Victoria Park, which isn't there. We're not there anymore. The Universal's not there anymore. But so everybody who was left over from Polygram comes to the building, and we're getting settled in. And there was a welcome package that the president of the company at the time, his name was Randy Lennox, provided to every new person at the company, and in that package was a copy of Phantom Power by the Hip. So we knew once you got to Universal in Canada, everybody is on Team Hip, and it's and over the years, like one of the ones that I started on, I think was We Are the Same. And then it moved to some other people. But ever since my time in catalog, I worked all of their catalog projects. But I had quite a substantial hand in doing a ton of the reissues that have come out over the last number of years, especially since manager Jake Gold came back, and we became very, very tight. We probably talked 7 or 8 times a day, and we did a lot of great things together, and I'm very proud of that. And I have, an incredible personal relationship with all the guys in the band, which is just, those guys are all amazing, all of them. And so, to me, if I could made any mark on Canadian music by bringing more hip music to the people, then I'm proud of that, and so.
And you were the marketing person on the Man Machine Poem Tour, which
I was.
Sadly was the final tour, and that must have been heartbreaking.
That was one of my, that was really, really tough. I went to the press conference when, they announced that Gord had the brain cancer, and I bawled my eyes out when he passed away, and they're part of the Canadian landscape and loved coast to coast and around the world, and I'm proud to have been a part of that. And even though I'm retired, I'm still going to do a few things with the guys, because I just can't let that go. And there were some wonderful messages from everybody at my retirement party rather. So.
And earlier I asked you if you were still running, because you look like you're in running shape there. But your first marathon, right? You raised money in Gord's honor. I
did. I actually, and I had so I did for the Channy Wenjack Fund, and the hospital that was associated with the Gord's cancer treatment.
Was that Sunnybrook or was that
Sunnybrook? Yeah, it was $4,500. I had a custom Tragically Hip running shirt made for the marathon that had the information on the back of the shirt and that, and I was really proud to do that, and I took the money down to Sunnybrook for the whole thing, and so it was a real satisfying thing for me to do at the time. So appreciate you bringing that up, and as I said, some great memories. And that was, I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the last concert in Kingston.
Yes.
I do have a bit of a side story on that. Is a buddy of mine came up from the U.S. To see the show. Is a guy who's knows more about Canada than most Canadians, but he's American, and so he had a Lotus, classic Lotus car with a Virginia plates on it that said the Hip on his license plates on his car. And so we were going on the 401 to that concert in Kingston, and we were going substantially over the speed limit. And of course we get pulled over by the OPP, and I thought, we're screwed. We're going to get because I was probably doing, 140. I don't know for sure what it was. And, we had some beer in the car. Nobody was drinking. It was just in the back of the car. But I just thought, what, this day could go very badly. And the cops came up to the car and said, are you guys going to the Hip show? I said, yes, sir, we are. And then he goes, well, it's a cool car that you got there, and neat plates. We don't want to bring you down on this great day, so just take it easy. And I just thought, you know what? Thank you so much. Like, it was just an amazing thing that happened. Of course, we took it easy after that, but
Sure.
that was just part of that hip day. The concert to me, obviously,
August 2016, right?
yes, yeah, and it was one of the most amazing moments in Canadian music history, and the second most watched thing on Canadian television after
The Golden Goal?
Golden Goal in 2010.
Wow.
So, it obviously resonated around the world, and it was just something that was amazing to be a part of, and I'll always be thankful for that.
Yeah, I miss them. Once in a while you got to look up and go. You look up to the gourd above and say, "Hey, man, thanks." That
Yes.
was quite the ride he gave this country, and we will never forget Gord Downey.
But I think the thing is that over the last number of years, they put out the Ouch EP, and there was a
Saskadelphia.
the Saskadelphia the album, the Saskadelphia mini album, and Fully Completely came out on vinyl, and then a Road Apples expanded, and then recently Phantom Power. So there's a lot of hip stuff that has never seen the light of day yet. They've been working very hard on unearthing, and incredible amounts of memorabilia that fans can enjoy. And I think that there'll be, and the other thing is that those guys also, they ran tape on lots of those shows, so I think at some point you'll probably see more
Doug
more live
McClement
things
maybe
out there.
has some stuff in
Doug McClement worked on many shows and things. I mean, there's some great shows that you can see on YouTube that were pretty legendary. Their Woodstock appearance. I mean, they were actually one of the bands at Woodstock that there was no trouble during their
Right,
set.
they were early enough.
They did a great set, and so.
Wow.
And there was also a show in the early days at the Misty Moon, a Much show at Misty Moon in Halifax, which is an incredible show. So there's things like that, and it's their 40th anniversary next year. So they've got a bunch of things that are planned. I mean, the things that you probably already know about. The biggest thing is there's going to be a 4-part documentary on Amazon Prime, and it's, man, oh man, people will love it. That's all I can say.
Okay, so this is a message for Jake Gold, who I know is listening. He's a good FOTM. I don't chat with him as often as Ivar does, but I do chat regularly with Jake Gold. Jake Gold personally, brought Paul Langlois into this basement recently, and we had a great chat. Paul played live, so I just want Jake to know there are other members of the Tragically Hip who have never been in this basement. So, Jake, let's make it happen and promote the documentary and all this great stuff. And Ivar, now that I know you're on the team, I'll be bugging you about it too. So.
Well, the guys live. They don't live in the city, so that's the thing, right?
But I did see Rob Baker at the Junk House show last week.
There you go. No,
he hangs out here.
They come in. It's just not as easy for them to get here as it is for me.
No, right. But when on the promotional tour, when they go to Breakfast Television, the next stop should be Toronto Mike's basement.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We're in agreement.
So.
All right, quick hits now. I'm glad you spent so much time on the hip. I was hoping you would, and that was wonderful, Ivar. And wow, okay, so do you remember Cougar Cuts?
Yes.
Tell the great unwashed what Cougar Cuts were. I knew you were behind those Cougar Cuts.
I mean, it's something that wouldn't come out today, but we were just having some fun. It was just like, songs for, bar songs or whatever that we put into a compilation and say, hey, let's do this.
That could come out today, though. I feel like you're not, these are consenting adult women. Who,
I wouldn't do it, looking back on, Ivar Hamilton and whatever we did that in late 90s or something.
Right.
And I wouldn't do it again today. I would think twice about it. We just wouldn't do it, It was fun. It was fun at the time. It was a moment.
Okay, so Universal Swallows EMI. You did a Beatles launch with Roger Ashby, FOTM Roger Ashby.
Yes, that was great to work with Roger. I mean, Roger is an absolute legend. We grew up listening to him in this city, and he's been retired since 2018. And the idea was to bring him in and see, share his Toronto Beatles memories. And we worked with the Toronto Star, and the Star did this great supplement that had all things that happened with the Beatles in Toronto, and so I really loved it. My only, I was too young for the Beatles at the time, but my only memory of the Beatles that I tried to get close to them was that when I was 9 years old, when John Lennon was out in Mississauga and stayed at Ronnie Hawkins' place. It wasn't far from where my grandmother lived, and we lived there at the time. So I went bounding through the fields with my grandmother's Brownie camera, hoping to catch John Lennon on a snowmobile, which never happened.
Amazing.
So
that's amazing.
But
right.
Roger was great. Really loved working with him. And who would have thought in 2023 you get a new Beatles record, a new Beatles song, and a new Stones album?
Yeah, what a time to be alive. Unbelievable. Now, great time to be alive. It's December 13th. We're chatting. It's a little after noon now. And tonight I will be seeing this gentleman along with some other Canadian rock gods. Underappreciated Pursuit of Happiness jam this is. I know you were involved quite a bit with Mo Berg and the Pursuit of Happiness. In fact, very recently, the 30th anniversary release of Love Junk. Mm-hmm. I still love Love Junk, but we're going to close with just a couple of FOTMs, if you will. First being Mo Berg and the Pursuit of Happiness. Well,
for Mo, for me, it all started at CFNY when the independent music that they had turned into a relationship with Chrysalis Records, and it's my understanding that Chrysalis signed Pursuit because of CFNY in Toronto. And so, yes,
like the first version of I'm an Adult Now.
Yes.
That was like the 86, whatever it was,
yeah.
Right.
So it was brought to their attention, and of course they had a great relationship and ended up working with Todd Rundgren, what have you. And so the reissue, to be honest with you, it was another guy that I worked with at Universal, Warren Stewart, who did the package, but I, tried to contribute some of my memorabilia and some things that, we used for some imaging in the package. So from a distance, but I know Mo very well. We had a great time. We brought him out to a Blue Jays to throw first pitch when we had a relationship with them, and he did some DJ work for us at some of our events and things like that. So love Mo, great guy, and I know Trans-Canada Highwaymen is going to be a great show for you.
Yeah, can't wait. And two of the members were here just a couple days ago, which was a great thrill for me. What about a gentleman who came by recently, just a sweetheart of a guy, came all the way from Montreal, Sam Roberts.
Yes, so Sam Roberts, right from the start, I was totally loved Sam Roberts, the band and their management team, and right from the first days of Brother Down, and I worked on a number of their reissues over the years as well. And one of the things that we did that was a lot of fun with Sam was the very first Winter Classic was in Buffalo, and Sam was the entertainment for that, and that was, I thought, was just amazing. And I also remember they were selling merch that day, and I kicked myself for never getting one. They had a T-shirt that said "Face Off on the 50," and I just thought that was so cool. And I saw it as I walked in, and then it was like afterwards, I'm like, I'll go get one. And of course they were all sold out, never got one again. So they were a part of that. And some great memories of seeing them at like Key to Bala a number of times. And when we did the reissue of the first record, we did some work with Alan Cross on it and shot a bunch of stuff with that, provided a bunch of extras. So Sam is absolutely great. Dave Spencer, who's managed him since day one, him and I are really good friends, and he always invites me out to the shows. So continue to support Sam Roberts in any shape or form.
Yeah, he's in a super group with Chris Murphy. Like Chris Murphy's addicted to being in super groups now, and there's a super group with Chris Murphy and Sam Roberts and a guy from Colorado, and Monk from Tokyo Police Club.
Cool, all great bands.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm gonna see if I can get a very thorough and accurate on our way out here. You've been amazing. I hope you enjoy retirement because you deserve it, and I'm gonna find up reasons to get you back to just talk about music because. Got to tap into that big brain of yours. What a great resource that'll be for FOTMs. But what is the exact status of the CFNY documentary? Because many listeners are anticipating this in 2024. Somebody came on recently and suggested that you'll have trouble licensing the original music. So I need a big update from you, Ivar.
We will not have trouble license. I don't know where people get that stuff, right?
I think they're just like looking for you guys to realize, it's expensive to get How Soon Is Now.
Yeah, well, listen, this wasn't my first rodeo, and I there's a number of I've been in situations before where people have the best of intentions and people are produce amazing content. There was a documentary a few years back. It was like, what is classic rock? And the guy who produced it, Daniel Sarkisian, a really lovely guy, and we've stayed in touch. And he sent me the first cut of this. I was like, Daniel, this is phenomenal. Like, it's just like everybody and anybody's in it. And I said, did you take care of all the music? And he goes, I didn't have budget for music. And so, and of course the thing never came out till about 2 years later, and it had about 4 songs in it, and that was it. So from the get-go on the CFNY documentary, we've been very clear that we needed to make sure that we have budget to do the right things that need to be in the movie. So I think that, if there's things that don't end up there, it's usually there, and some acts might not feel that they don't want to have, have their songs in there. So that happens on occasionally too. And you've got masters and master use and publishing, and, you have to bring the two of those together. So, so the answer is that we will have great music in it. Is that you can't have a documentary on the spirit of radio without having great music. So that will happen. Absolutely. So the documentary itself, we're at the point now where we're kind of getting into the final edits, and we're just trying to make sure that we have all the facts correct and some continuity that's done properly. Because I think the thing is, for those of you that saw the Much Music documentary, there was some people that weren't happy about certain things, and things got left out. And so, we absolutely know that you can never please everybody, but we're going to do our best. We're doing our best to make it so people aren't going to lose their minds because we missed X, X, and X. So, are you glad that Sean Menard went first, so you could just kind of adapt? Was it good that they went first? I think it was, there was a couple of learnings out of it. I think we would have been fine without it, but I think there was a couple of things that, I love the fact that they took it across the country and took it to various communities for people to. I mean, the guy rented Roy Thompson Hall, for goodness sakes. That's a big swing. So they did some good things on it, and Much Music was a much bigger thing than CFNY was. It was a national footprint. People loved it around the world. I mean, for a great deal of years in my tenure at Universal Music, that Much was number one. It was like, if you weren't on Much, we got a problem, right? I keep saying that to the guys from Lowest to the Low. I'm like, there was like a blind spot for this great Shakespeare My Butt album that I was hearing like crazy on CFNY, and it was always strange for young Mike to. It was in one universe where I was consuming all my music, but it wasn't in the other one. Yeah. So. Anyway, I mean, Menard was great, but I mean, there's been a lot of parallel radio station documentaries that have been made that are out there for U.S. places and some, other places in other parts of the world. So we all collectively looked at a bunch of those and, had some learnings on it. But at the same time, we didn't want to do what they were doing. We wanted to tell the spirit of radio story. And I think the other thing is that we've been very conscious about when we need to end it. And I think it's because, realistically, the Bare Naked Ladies weren't Spirit of Radio era. That was after the fact, right? So we needed to just make sure that this documentary is about the Spirit of Radio years, essentially 1977 up until, Alan will say up to 92, but really it's kind of up to about 1990. And that's where...
I always wonder this when I think about it all. Like, how does the Spirit of Radio era of CFNY differ any from the David Marsden era of CFNY? Well, are they not like essentially one and the same? Like your Spirit of Radio ends when Marsden leaves.
Well, the thing is, there is a short time period before, and that is like in 1977. David didn't get there till like literally the end of 1979. So you had Rainer Schwartz and David Pritchard running that radio station prior to that. And that station was extremely eclectic and free form out there. Classical music, folk music, you name it, blues, all of these things that they were doing. It wasn't really an alternative station. It was like an everything radio station. So, but that's kind of like, that set it up to move into the Spirit of Radio, which David kind of focused more when he got there. There's a little bit of, when David leaves, I mean, he was obviously frustrated with what was going on, but there was certainly a base of employees who 100% supported the Spirit of Radio, the spirit of what they did. So, including Don Burns, who was the program director after David. So we were still, able to carry on for a short period before the sales guys came in and did what they did.
And the words of the prophet were written on the studio walls.
Yes, sir.
Ivar, congratulations on retirement. And I love this 90 minutes we just spent talking about some of the highlights. If I missed anything you were dying to talk about, now is the time.
Oh, okay.
Like, I don't know, were you driving here thinking, I want to make sure I tell my LL Cool J story? And then Mike didn't prompt for the LL Cool J story.
Well, like Lionel Richie, LL Cool J, I love the guy. He was great. He was a great guy to work with. He made some great records. He had he charmed people all over the place. The only regret I ever have is that we were never able to sign Russell Peters. I really wanted the company to sign Russell Peters.
You were here with Russell. I forgot to put that on the list. You came on with Clayton Peters. Yeah. Of course. You talked about your reunion. Of course. Yeah.
So I really worked that one hard, but I couldn't get people to believe in comedy, and I didn't really have any backup on it because, like, well, give me some comedy sales or whatever, and they're just, there weren't. But I believe, Russell became such a superstar that there was probably, so we didn't get to do that. But whatever, that's I'll always be there to support Russell too, because he's a good friend and he's an amazing comedian.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,391st show. You can follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. I'm at Toronto Mike. Much love to those who made this possible. That is Great Lakes Brewery, Palma Pasta, Raymond James Canada, Moneris, RecycleMyElectronics.ca. That's where you go, Ivor, if you have some old cables, some old devices, some old electronics you need to get rid of. Don't throw it in the garbage. Those chemicals end up in our landfill. Go to RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Find a place near you. You could drop them off to be safely and properly recycled. And Ridley Funeral Home. See you all tomorrow when there is a new episode. We're going to fact check Randy Bachman. This will be very interesting. My guest for that episode is the man who knows more about the Guess Who than Randy Bachman, Robert Lawson. See you all then.